Commission meeting for Wednesday, May 1st, 2019. I'm John Torgerson, the current chair of the commission, and everyone else will be introduced as the roll is called by Lisa Wondrash, the city's communications director.
John Torgerson.
Here.
Tony Ramirez.
Here.
Carol Dennis.
Here.
Dave Chappelle.
Here.
Tom Wright.
Here.
Jack Eaton.
Here.
Okay, so it looks like we've got a little feedback issue that they're dealing with. We might as well move on with the approval of the agenda. Any
I'll make a
discussion?
motion, we
Okay.
approve the agenda. Yes.
Is there a second?
As is.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Shall we vote?
Not
No?
necessarily, usually just.
Okay,
yeah.
that's enough?
Yep.
And we move on to the approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
I second it.
Seconded? All right, good. Okay. And fourth on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any members of the public here today who'd like to make a comment? No? Okay, so our guests have declined to comment. All right, the fifth item on the agenda is the CTN report.
Okay, so, excuse me. This is the report for January through March. It's the usual format, where we begin with activity highlights from January. We covered a second solid waste resources planning meeting. We had the Rec and Ed Camp TV. That was our winter version of that. We also had our winter sports began in January. The staff had a training conducted by the police department, an ALICE training. We did that in January. And then we were also closed for 2.5 days during that extreme cold spell. In February, we had our new playback system installation begin. The future planning meetings for the subcommittee for this commission began, and we also had another training for staff on workplace safety. In March, we began training on our new playback system. That just finished up in the beginning of April. And then we also began coverage of the Design Review Board Commission. That's another monthly commission we'll be covering every month. We had our annual coverage of the Environmental Excellence Awards, and we completed our series with the Ann Arbor Film Festival, our Let's Watch program. Then we have the programming information for the 4 channels. We did 50, during that 3-month period, we did 50 city meetings. On the public access channel, there were 139 programs that premiered. 82 programs were submitted for playback, and our community producers completed 43 programs. There were 59 portable equipment reservations. There were 572 hours logged in facilities by our community producers. Staff conducted 4 public workshops. We also had our Rec and Ed camp, and we continued trainings with the YMCA, Huron High School, and Skyline High School. Then on the educational channel, we had 115 programs premiere, which also included 7 Board of Education meetings that we produced. And then on the community channel, we had 141 programs premiere. And then we have, at the end there, we have our video on demand statistics with our Vibit, which is our meetings, and then our YouTube channel, which is pretty much everything else. And you can see what the top 2 for each month were. And if anybody has any questions.
You note that you were closed for 2.5 days. What kind of impact does that have on the operation here when you have to shut down because of an emergency?
The timing of that actually worked out where I believe we only missed, no, actually we didn't miss any meetings
Yeah.
because the only meeting during the days that we had to shut was the school board meeting, and they were also closed, so they canceled their meeting. The first day was a half day. We were open for part of that day, so we had to contact people to tell them we're shutting down, we're not going to be open, and we had lost power. So that happens every now and then, usually in this time of year when we get the bad storms. There were some trainings that got rescheduled, and other than that, it didn't impact us too badly.
But the programming on.
The programming continues because it's sort of automated in that sense. It's more the production work and the live events.
Any other discussion about the CTN report? All right, move on to regular business. So there have been, the CTN Futuring Subcommittee has been meeting. We met 3 times
Yes.
since the last full committee meeting.
And prior to diving into that too, I wanted to introduce everyone and welcome Carol Gunnis, our newest member of the Cable Commission.
Nice to be here.
I guess we could have waited for staff comments, but I didn't want to be remiss in welcoming you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and if you maybe want to say a few words about your background, Carol, or what interests you in serving.
Well, I'm interested in CTN. I have used the facilities, not frequently, but on occasion, and found it very useful. I think that I'm going to bring a different viewpoint than maybe some people have here, because I have an extensive experience in marketing, which it sounds like we need from what I've read thus far. I mentioned before, I'm winding up a 2020 the Musical, a new musical that I'll be starting to perform in and market in June, and hopefully make a difference for Democrats. And that tells you a little bit about me.
Thanks, Carol.
Kind of on that note, I would note that John is up for reappointment on the commission, and there are 2 other individuals who have been noted or proposed to be appointed to the commission. I think that brings us up to a full roster finally.
At the
So-
May 6th City
Yep.
Council meeting, you'll consider that?
I think that at the May 6th is the first reading.
It takes 2,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah.
So, but yes, so I look forward to that. We got down to kind of a slim roster for a while, so that'll be good.
Okay.
So back to business.
Back to business, yeah.
So in your packet, we provided to you a memo that I had prepared that was sent to John, that provided for our viewers who don't have a copy in front of them. It provided the background on CTN and our mission for providing multimedia resources and programming to serve the public interests and strengthen the fabric of the Ann Arbor community. Since 1973, we've been delivering on that mission with a variety of programming, 4 cable channels, live online streaming, video on demand, public access workshops, and government TV programming. We are funded solely through franchise fees per the state franchise agreement legislation that was passed in 2006. We have had state franchise agreements with Comcast and AT&T. They're 10-year agreements, and they provide 5% franchise fees and 2% PEG fees for CTN to provide services to the community.
Okay, so when do they expire?
In 2026 and 2027. I'm sorry, I thought I had included that within here. They were just recently approved in their 10 years, so we have time on those. And fiscal year 2019, which is the year that we are currently in, we have seen a decline in franchise fee revenue by about 7%. That has been projected since last year. And so our what we had anticipated to receive in revenue was not achieved. I think in the past, there had been perhaps some stabilization due to increase in rates. And since that time, the stabilization though has declined in revenue. So as a result, as you know, in February, we formed a subcommittee, which met 3 times in February, March, and April. Concurrently, staff met multiple times to develop some recommendations for this commission to discuss and consider. And what we were recommending, along with what the subcommittee had discussed and agreed with, was the following. To implement in fiscal year 2020, which would be this coming July 1st into early fall, to significantly reduce the reliance on temporary employees, and continually to evaluate reduction of all expenses at CTN, which would include replacement of equipment, materials, and supplies. And then to cover core services. So all of our staff and resources then would get realigned to cover the following, which would be city board and commission and council meeting coverage. I should say current city board and commission and council meeting coverage, Board of Ed meetings, election coverage, and special public meeting coverage, which would be based upon staff availability. The productions, we would continue to produce our current productions that are listed. I won't read all of them, but what we did assess and analyze was that some productions, in order to save costs, would get produced on the same day. Or if they were produced, let's say 12 times during the year, we were going to reduce the frequency to 9 times. So those productions that are impacted are asterisked there. And the reason that we would make that type of recommendation is in order to save time with sets that have to get set up, the lighting that has to get done, and it reduces the production costs associated with those. We were recommending discontinuing the production of 4 events, which was the A2 Summer Festival, the Environmental Excellence Awards, Orchestra Night, and TEDx Youth at Ann Arbor. The reason that we're recommending the discontinuation of those productions is based upon the analysis we did with how much productions cost by way of equipment usage, staff time, and editing, and how much those productions are viewed in the community. That is attached in the back here for your review. That was the appendix that Greg spent a great deal of time, and if you'd like him to explain it in more detail, he can. But basically, we went through every single production and service that CTN provides and assessed a cost to it. And then also assessed a point system based upon the popularity of the production or service. And I say service because that also includes our workshops, public access, training, all of the services that we provide. And the reason that was so important is in order for us to then determine if in fact these productions that we're recommending to discontinue, should they want to continue service with CTN, we know exactly how much those productions would cost and the staff, and could reconsider that as an option, should those entities want to pay for that service. The same goes for additional, whether it's additional regular board or commissions that are added on to our core, or public meetings. We know exactly how much those cost now in order to assess whether we'd have to cut elsewhere to pay for them, or those costs would have to get generated from from either an agency or the general fund, as an example, in order to pay for them. The services then that we'd like to move forward with implementing is doing training, facility usage, and tours by appointment only. And our CTN facility hours then to have some type of core hours. We're saying 11 to 8 p.m. Those could get modified slightly. But basically that allows us to, when we're doing by appointment only, to not have front staff up front waiting for someone to show up and they can get reassigned to a production that's happening. And the reason also why we recommended perhaps implementing some of these in the fall is we obviously would have to have plenty of time to promote these changes to our volunteers and public clients. So they have plenty of time to know that these changes are coming. We also would be changing cablecast hours from 5 a.m. to midnight. So we would still have bulletin board information up. It wouldn't be that the channels go dark, but we wouldn't be programming them until 5 a.m. Tier 2, these recommendations could be assessed and implemented in 2021, which would be July 1st, 2020. And I say assessed because we don't yet know if in fact the revenue decrease might stabilize a bit, or we don't know if it would increase and require us to move more quickly. So we're offering these as recommendations so that if in fact that does happen, we don't have to go back to the drawing board or come back to the board. We know that we could start to move quickly through these and assess what opportunities we might have here and then bring it back to the board for consideration. And those include eliminating an open FTE programmer position. That individual had quit the city. We didn't have enough information when the budget was prepared in December to know whether or not we had to move forward in that position elimination, but we do now. We had already prepared the budget for 2020, but we believe strongly that in 2021, though, that position should be eliminated in order to streamline those FTE costs. We'd also be assessing public facility equipment replacement needs, exploring cost-saving options regarding CTN rental space, exploring utilizing volunteers to produce Access Ann Arbor or high school sports, explore a standard set design with production lighting that might require less modification from set to set, and explore partnerships with agencies covered by CTN. So revenue opportunities could include studio rental, charging for production services beyond the core that I've outlined, workshop fees that could include for adult Rec and Ed. We already charge for student for camps, but they're very popular and we found it a really good partnership with Rec and Ed. So perhaps we could explore adult workshops and perhaps monetizing our YouTube channel. I don't know what all that would entail or if that would be viable, but it's on there because it could be a possible revenue opportunity. So these are the recommendations that the subcommittee and staff have concluded. Are there any specific questions that you have about anything in particular that you'd like to dive into? Or
Yes. Okay. Okay, our revenue is decreasing by 7%. Now, I'm not a math major, but in dollar sense, I kind of figure that was about $400,000 less.
We're now about 140,000 is what we are anticipating needing to capture in order to balance.
140,000.
Right.
Which is
Right.
an amount, but not.
That's what we would be
small.
shooting for annually.
Okay. And that's usually mostly from cord cutting. I mean, people are cutting the basic
Correct.
cable service, and they're going to
Correct.
other streaming.
This is a
avenues.
decline nationally, that it's not just
Okay.
something that we're experiencing in Ann Arbor.
And in the future, we could even see a further reduction or a further hardship because of the proposed Senate bills that are being introduced.
Correct.
You know, which is
Yes.
another thing. So I know.
Things happening at the FCC.
Right. Right.
Correct.
So I
Could be a
recognize
whole
that there's
other track.
There's a wall coming up for us or whatever. But my concerns is on the score system, on the score, the project, and you got a budget here, goes from low, about $200 for the lowest, up to $6,000 for the highest. And the score, the lower the score, the more popular it is.
No, the score was, so the cost was computed by our finance person.
Finance department.
Who went through the staffing costs and the equipment costs. And he had a formula that he put together, the amount of time that it takes to do things. And so he assigned a cost value per production for each of the different ones. And we had gone through with all the staff to get everybody to give us numbers on how long does it typically take you to do this project or that, how many people does it typically take. And that's how he came up with a cost for it. And then we went back through the numbers and kind of devised a little formula for the lowest cost, the fewest, the least amount of time and resources it would take to do a production in terms of cost and people and time, but was the most popular in terms of online views and well-known by the public. And so then by making a little formula for that, we came up with a numbering thing that the lower the number there means it has a lot of views online, it's very popular, but it doesn't cost as much. It doesn't necessarily line up exactly where the least expensive program has the lowest score, as well as the most expensive might not have the highest score.
Well, I'm surprised to find the airfare at the very bottom. I mean,
And it's a 3 days, three
It's
people
very,
in the
very
booth
costly.
all day
Right.
long.
Costly.
Right, so it,
But you're not relying on volunteers as much as you did in the past. Usually it was one staff member and all volunteers.
There
Lately,
was
for
some
the last 3 or 4
reliability
years, it's been,
that we ran into with
yeah,
that
but we've
model.
been doing that I've been volunteering for the airfare booth for over 23 years, and that never came up before. And then all of a sudden, we're finding that there's a liability after doing it for 30 years. Because, I mean, I'm just
well,
saying.
we're not eliminating the art fair booth.
Right.
We're just
Cutting it by
cutting
one day.
off.
Cutting one day because it's sad, because they went from Thursday through Sunday, and then Saturday I can see
Right.
where the cost would incur. So you're just gonna do Thursday, Friday.
Thursday and Friday.
Right, okay.
And we're also looking, I mean, you bring up the point which was in there about trying to make more use of volunteers.
Right.
And that's out there for everything.
Right. And as far as the number of online views, I mean, CTN is a TV channel. It's not a YouTube channel. And CTN, we don't know how many viewers actually watch CTN through the broadcast means on their TV.
Correct, we don't get
Right,
that
you don't get
data.
that, you know.
No, that's not provided.
I'm an avid CTN viewer. I mean,
Mhm.
I live by CTN, believe it or not.
Mhm.
So I think, by counting your online views is really not a metric that should even be considered using to generate how popular or how many hits you get by YouTube. I mean, this is a service for the public, whether there's only one viewer out there watching it or 1,000 viewers out there watching it at any particular time. So so I think that should be taken into consideration. As far as the production cutbacks, okay, our fair go to 2 days. They have no problem with that. The discontinued producing shows, Ann Arbor Summer Festival, and the Environmental Excellence Awards, TEDx Youth at Ann Arbor, an orchestra night. Now, those are only 1 year productions, 1 per year productions. So I think all these add a value to our stations. I know the Ann Arbor Summer Festival is really nice. I like to watch that. And I'm pretty sure other people do too, in order to see what's coming up for the upcoming season. As far as the TEDx Youth, I know there's a lot of prep time, like a week involved with prep time with doing those. But the value, I think the value outweighs the cost of cutting it out. And it's a good program to reach young adults, and it provides a valuable training service for people because they get trained, they ask for volunteers. And as far as costs for staff, I mean, the staff is getting paid no matter what, whether they're physically down here at CTN behind their desks or whether they're out there in the field doing setup or training. I mean, so the cost is that way. So I can see cutting back on programs. If you're doing 12 programs a year, one a month, or even once a week, I can see a reason to cut back on that type of programming. But I think to discontinue these 4 programs, which I think offer a valuable service for the citizens of Ann Arbor, which is only produced one time a year, I think those should be not discontinued.
Well, on the orchestra
okay.
night,
Right.
they limit us in what we're allowed as replays. So we spend quite a lot of money producing that, and we're only allowed to air it twice.
And
We do
because
not
of-
have unlimited ability for that programming.
because of copyright issues.
Correct.
And their orchestra night, I'm thinking classical music, or is it different forms of genres, or different forms?
Usually
Usually.
some classical.
Yeah, but just the fact that we are
Yeah.
incurring all of the costs to produce this, and we do not have the ability to replay it.
We play it on CTN or?
Correct.
Well, post it on YouTube,
We can't put it online at all.
right, okay.
So it's only on the cable channel, and then it varies from piece to piece how often we can play it.
So them limiting us
Okay.
when we are putting out all of the costs to produce
Do
it.
they see an advantage to you to CTN covering it?
Well,
The schools will get a copy of it and they keep it.
Well, if you
know.
go to them and say, we're not going to do this unless,
So we're recommending the fact that we cannot continue covering everything.
Okay.
And these 4 recommended program reductions is the result of that. If we want to continue covering everything, then we have to scale back everything.
may I say something?
Sure, of course.
What I hear here, there's so much about, let's cut here, and let's cut here, and let's cut here. We're not thinking about what can we do to monetize the things that we offer to bring in additional revenue.
Yes.
And I really think we should be thinking about that, because that could make a big difference.
We already are. That's why we're having the other meetings on revenue privately every month.
Uh-huh.
So this is the product of a subcommittee meeting where we've had a series of meetings and we did discuss both cuts and revenue. You have to understand that if you try to monetize some of these things, it actually adds expense because you have to suddenly have a revenue office here. Chasing money is expensive at times.
Well, okay, for one, I hear you talking about additional meetings that are being done for the city.
Mhm.
And we're supposed to absorb that?
Not under this model, the core programs that are outlined are the core. Any additional meeting request above that, we would be monetizing by asking those departments to pay for it, or.
Have you put together a structure for how much they're going to be charged?
Yes, that's the appendix.
Okay, and the thing that concerns me is this. I don't think that CTN is very well known.
Mhm.
I don't think enough people know about it. I don't think enough people know about the services that it offers. And that's a problem, because I think some of the things that David referred to, if these are things that can increase awareness. That's really important.
How can we monetize that, though? We can
Well,
definitely.
Because, well, for instance, I'm just, shooting from the hip here. There are seminars that different staff here give where people can learn about different things. They come for several, let's say 9 hours or 12 hours to learn about something in order to be able to use the equipment. Now, I have a better feeling about asking businesses and organizations to pay money than I do about people who come in for that. But what you could do is say, we offer this 12-hour seminar, and in return, you have an obligation to volunteer here for X number of hours. Which you're saying volunteers can take over some of the work that staff does. So if you attach not a fee, but a kind of fee for service to the training. And the other thing is, I've mentioned this to all sorts of people. People don't even know that they do training here. Is there anything on the cable television stations that talks about the training that's available?
Oh,
Well, there is, yeah.
We
Tons of
advertise, we have a
PSAs
website, we have a social
stuff coming
media
out.
platforms,
For some reason, it's still
the outreach at the art fair and the townie party,
Okay,
and
it's still somehow
the schools.
it's not out as much as it could be, I don't think. But again, that's a way to get more volunteers to say, yes, you can take our seminar, but it's the quid pro quo is that you have to volunteer X number of hours in order to get what we're offering. Yeah.
Volunteers are very hard to keep. I've been a volunteer for many, many years. They'll call a meeting or they call an event. Half the people don't show up to help. I did it just this past Saturday. We called for our help to come, the board and so on and so forth. Nobody showed up. 2 people. And they were doctors. I mean, they took their time and came out, just 2 people. And the rest of them didn't even show up.
Well, so how can
And
we
volunteers, you can't depend on
incentivize them?
volunteers to say, X amount of people's gonna show up, they won't. And that can put you in a position where you can't,
Well, how can
it'd
you
be pretty
incentive?
hard.
How can you create an incentive for them to show up?
Well,
I don't know the answer.
It just doesn't happen. Not
I
when you
would-
volunteer.
I rely on volunteers all the time. That's the only source I have to get a crew, because I'm a volunteer producer. I don't have access for staff or interns or anybody like that. So, you just got to call. It's hard, and you got to eventually you will find people that are dedicated to come down, spend 4 hours down here, basically sometimes doing nothing except manning the camera. And that's it. And you got to treat them nice. I mean, the producer,
Right.
and what I usually do is, let's go get a beer after breakdown. I'll buy, I would have potlucks. I would treat them nice. But volunteers, I mean, obviously I have some ideas on how to outreach more, but I'm going to get back to this one point before I lose it. This is the point that most disturbs me. Well, not disturbs me. That's a bad term. But the facility hours, 8 o'clock. That's a no-go in my book. It's just not going to work for a volunteer producer like me. Like I said, I can't rely on staff or interns or any other temporaries
It's
down
too
here. to
early in
man
the
my-
evening to
yes.
close.
Right. Most, people, the volunteers I have to get work. Usually 8 from either it's 9 to 6 or 9 to 5 or 10 to 6. So usually when I do a production, I have crew call. In the old days, so we used to have hours to 10 o'clock. So and that was come back to 9 o'clock. And now you propose at 8 o'clock. I would have to book the studio for usually a 4-hour booking. That's what it really takes. Sometimes 4 hours minimum. 6 to 10 or 5 to 9. Let's take the 5 to 9. So 5 to 9, hour and a half to set up. I mean, at least set up and get everything right. Half an hour to break down. And if you're doing an hour program, you would have to start taping at 6:30. 6:30 to 7:30, then half an hour to break down by 8. And there's, there's no way I can get a crew here which means I would have to book the studio from 5 or 4, whatever. 4 o'clock, 4 to 8, 4 hours. There's no way I'm going to get a volunteer crew. So that 8 o'clock, it would just be a burden on citizen producers, finding crews, set up, breakdown time. But
Would
so
you like
that's,
to propose 12 to 9 p.m., Dave, or
well, yeah. 12. I mean,
we could offer a solution on a
Right.
case-by-case basis?
Why don't you think about maybe alternate days? If you have 5 days, why do the hours have to be the same? Instead of being from 10 to...
It was for consistency's
Oh.
sake,
Right.
but the other thing too is we didn't recommend, we did take a look at our usage
Right.
prior to making this recommendation. So I completely understand that usage doesn't work for you, but by and large, the majority of our usage isn't happening at 9 p.m. So that's why on a case-by-case basis, or 12 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Well, it's not happening at 9, but I mean, what productions? I mean, a volunteer usually is not going to do a production in the daytime, because either the volunteer or the producer's got to go to his own 9-to-5 job. This volunteer's got their outside life. They got to go home, eat, at least visit the family, say hello, goodbye to their kids. So, I mean, where the staff here, when you guys do a production, you rely on interns, volunteers, and temporary workers to help you. You don't have that consideration that I would have to have in finding a crew. So, I mean, I have no objection. You want to do it at 12. If that's okay with the CTN staff, that's fine with me. I mean, but
Your message though is you don't like decreasing the evening hours.
no, believe me. I mean, that would put I don't do that much in studio production anymore, per se, because usually, people don't call me up no more. But and it's probably true that in studio production, ever since the Highline is getting more popular, and Highline, you don't have to rely on a crew, you don't have to rely on volunteers. You can just go in there, do your own show, and be done with it. And so people are shying away, I believe, from the studio users to go directly to the online studio. So 8 o'clock would just be a killer for anybody that wants to do a production. So I just would recommend keep it at 9 if you want to go 12
Or
at
a
9.
staggered approach, like Carol had suggested.
I would
if there
say
was two-
consistency, because trying to find, if you got a crew of 5, trying to, it's really a lot of behind the scenes work about trying to get everybody, are you free on Tuesday? No, I'm free. I'm not free on Tuesday, but I'm free on Wednesday. Well, I'm not free on Wednesday, but I'm free on Tuesday. So it's hard to get everybody. So if I know that, that a month from now, I would say keep it consistent as far as your hours instead of staggered.
So we'll need to go back and check with staff then on
Right, I
what
would say,
impacts
if
that
they
would
don't,
have, but.
Right, I would say, but that 8 o'clock would just be a killer to us volunteer producers.
Okay.
And like I said, and as far as you want to do appointments for facility users, walk-ins. How many walk-ins for editing do you get? I mean, you don't get that many, do you? People just pop in and say, "I need to edit."
I think there are, sometimes they get quite a few.
Quite a few. So, I mean, if you could keep that little segment open, if you want to do a tour, you got to schedule something, or if you want to do this, you got to schedule equipment checkout, you got to schedule. But for editing, I think if because you just come and edit, you just assign, because people now, they actually book online to, if they walk in, all they got to do is If the editing room is not being used, you just assign them the hard drive and, you know, the stuff, and they just go do their thing.
But that requires a person to do that.
Right, well, there's always a staff member, I mean.
But there wouldn't be
Yeah.
if we're able to then utilize that staff person to a production here or off-site.
Yeah, but but you won't keep that. There's always gotta be somebody manning the door or
There
manning the front
wouldn't
desk.
be. That's why it would be by appointment.
Well, what if somebody just drove by and wanted some information? I mean,
We would have a sign on the door referring them to calling us or the website.
and they're gonna look at that sign and say, well, you know, they wanna pop in and say, hey, look, I read about CTN taking care of stands here. If you make them jump through, you know, if they say, hey, there's CTN, and I heard about that, I'm gonna stop by and find some more information about it. They come to the door, and there's nobody here, and there's a sign on the door saying, in order to talk to somebody, you gotta make an appointment. They're gonna say the heck with that. And,
I agree with David. I think it's very
and not
off-putting.
even go out.
I
You always gotta
totally
have-
agree. There's
yeah,
a
you
big
gotta have somebody
majority
at
of the
front.
week that staff are not being utilized up there because they're sitting and waiting. So, I totally agree with that.
But how about
If-
an intern?
if
I mean,
that's
there's-
how we want to
Well,
assign.
I think also part of it is when someone walks in to use an edit suite, sometimes they're gonna need assistance.
Okay.
And the person that can answer the door and answer questions isn't always able to offer assistance in the edit suite.
Okay, so, okay.
And it's worse if we have someone who can't assist them than if we have nobody at all. Because if they come in and they have a not as positive experience because they're not getting a more trained individual, that I think would be worse. So I think the appointment only situation, going with this scenario, does make a lot of sense because they're gonna get higher quality.
Okay, so I withdraw editing, I take back the walk-ins for editing. But from what I got out of this was that you actually plan to have nobody up front, somebody just
I
wants to
think
knock
that
on
would
the
be
door.
more in a random case.
That-
It's more likely that somebody would be around to hear the door and would go up, but they might not be somebody that could help, you know,
Edit
someone in an
or
edit suite.
train someone.
So it's not ideal that we're looking at these cutbacks, but it's just the grim reality that year by year, it looks like the cable fees revenue is going to diminish. And so in the short term, we're looking at things that we can do to be more efficient. At the same time, part of the subcommittee's discussions were long-term planning. We could end up without any cable fees in the not too distant future, and so we need to plan ahead to determine how we would fund CTN. You know,
What did you determine?
we actually haven't. We pondered some things. There's the possibility of proposing a millage. Millages are not terribly popular, but it would take a rather small one to fund. I think the total budget here is about $2.2 million. So that's a third of a mill. But nonetheless, the voters would have to approve that. Right now, the general fund budget for the city is probably big enough to absorb some unexpected declines.
So why can't we go to the city now?
Well, because right now we're basically living within our means at CTN. In the long run, the city's general fund balance has some structural problems. So next year, we're kind of flush with money, but 5 years out, we have some significant shortfalls projected. And so kind of on the same path that the shortfalls are going to arise here, the general fund is also going to be challenged from every other direction. So it's good that we're starting this discussion early. It's good that we're actually addressing it by prioritizing. We have had significant revenues over a long period of time that apparently are not going to hold up over time. So we are trying to address it, both short-term and long-term, but we don't have a concrete plan for the long-term. We have identified what we need to do to live within the revenues this particular year. As council liaison, I will be taking this back to council at the next meeting and warning the full council that the services that CTN provide us, that we've grown accustomed to, are under the threat of underfunding, and
Why can't, instead of telling them we're under the threat of underfunding, why can't we say, things have changed, we are underfunded, and we need help?
We didn't do that this year, and if that we didn't have this discussion early enough to surmount that.
But there are
I-
meetings every month, aren't
I-
there?
Here?
Quarterly.
No, I'm saying,
Quarterly.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about here.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
talking.
Oh, the city
taking-
council?
Yes.
But our budget is done once a year.
Oh.
And we are about to approve a budget for the next fiscal year. So trying to amend that would be a challenge at this point in time. So I think that responsibly, staff has looked at what we do here and noted that some of the things that CTN performs are very expensive and not widely viewed. And I think that it's just basic responsible budgeting to prioritize your spending, which was the first step. That's what we engaged in. The next one is actually going to be to warn council that they can't just add boards and commissions and expect to have them televised if they don't also fund.
Yeah.
I think in the last 6 months we've probably added two commissions, and that's going to be time consuming for staff here. They're going to do the usual excellent job they do, but as council moves forward, every time we consider bringing up a new board or commission, we're going to actually have to come up with the money to fund that. And so by making sure that everybody understands that we've already gone through the belt tightening, the prioritization and cutting back on some things that are not necessities, that sends the message to council that anything more that we expect out of the CTN staff has to be funded, in addition to what they get from the franchise fees. So we are working in that direction.
Well, it would sound to me like the two commissions that were just added that CTN shouldn't absorb that.
Well, I will tell you, council has, as of late, started up its practice of having a Sunday evening caucus meeting. And we are not asking for CTN to record that because it would be quite expensive. And so we are certainly trying to be more responsive at the council level.
I want to get back to this, having the staff available for people to greet at the door. This is divided into two sections: government and city and citizens area. Now, will there always be somebody in the government section for the hours of operation?
There's nobody back there right now.
It depends on what
You know,
productions are currently
right.
happening
And
for
that's
where
really
staff
just
are
the-
assigned.
The way the building was laid out when we initially
Yeah.
moved in.
I thought you didn't like us no more. But it just, usually it would just seem, I'm just finding it hard to wrap my mind around this. If there's a plaque on the door saying hours, 8 to 9 or 12 to 9, and then I come here at 4, and then there's nobody here, then obviously your hours are not 12 to 9.
Well, we'd have to update all of our signage based upon the outcome of this meeting. None of that's been
And,
done.
And I
and
don't
if
think-
somebody drove here and they
Right.
saw that,
I don't think we're
They'd be
saying that
mighty-
there would be nobody here. It's just there might be a production going on in here that the staff comes back and goes to work on.
Yes, that has to get
So you
assigned
might stand
to.
at that door for 10 minutes or 15 minutes before somebody hears it and comes up and lets you in, because we didn't know you were gonna show up.
But I mean, how about safety? I mean, how about as far as, you know?
Well, the door is locked, that's why.
Yeah, I know, but for other I mean, it just seems strange. That's like, you know, I don't know. It just seems strange where, because like it says, let's say a citizen, I have been in the front often enough to realize where I've seen people come in on a regular basis, either to drop off a tape of their son that they took, not production-wise, like a playback, a yellow form. And they'll just come in, or else they'll come in and say, hey, I saw my son's water polo team, can I get a copy of that tape? You know, they just assume that your hours are, I mean, how are you going to convey that to the public? I mean, we don't know if somebody's going to be, you know, called before you arrive. That's, you know, it just seems.
I agree with David. I think it makes
a
no
business
sense not to
model.
have.
If I set up a business, I'm saying, and I tell the people, come to my business. I need your business, but call because I don't know if I'm going to be here. They're not gonna come. I mean, they gonna, you know, they want. I know. I don't know. It just seems where we can't get, you know, somebody. I mean, obviously this is long term. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, I just think it needs to be we thought out a little bit more about how, is there a possibility where we can make sure somebody can always man the door in case somebody drops in? I mean, if and after due consideration, it comes to a point where there can't be nobody, and then so be it. I mean, if you can't do it, you can't do it.
So perhaps we should document then the number of people who are drop-ins over the course of 6 months, and then the number of productions that person up front couldn't get reassigned to?
Yeah, right. Just take account of how many actually people just walked in off the street. You know.
Well, that assessment's already been done.
No, I'm
Which is
not calling for volunteers coming in to use the editing suites. I'm just talking about citizens coming in with a question or two. I mean, just somebody to come in. Hey, CTN, how do I take part in this
So
place?
the number of people who are
Come in
fully
or-
unfamiliar with
has
CTN and
nothing-
just dropping in off the street.
Has nothing
and
to do with
start
CTN.
tracking those folks.
Right. That has nothing to do with CTN. Never took the classes, never produced a show. Somebody, average citizen Joe's come off the street and ask. I mean, if you got nobody doing it for 6 months, then okay, you got a case. But if you find there's 4, 5, 6, or 7 a month that come in that just happen to be driving by and see it, so let's find out if there's a need there.
So how much do we think we're going to be saving by making this particular move? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, the savings was being able to reassign staff to
Right.
other productions. So I
Right.
couldn't tell you right now, without having done a schedule, the other productions that can't get done as a result of that decision.
Right.
So there wasn't a saving surrounding that. Many
But-
of these recommendations are based upon the reallocation
Of hours.
of staff
Yeah.
on productions.
But it seems to me there are some staff, like a receptionist is not someone who can work on CTN.
We don't have a receptionist.
Well, there was someone up to a few weeks ago, every time I came in.
We've had temp staff, and we have to significantly cut our reliance on temporary staff.
And why is that? Because I would think temp staff is less expensive than non-temp
They
staff.
It
certainly
actually
are.
is, and city council passed a resolution asking the city administrator to cut back on reliance of temporary staff across the entire operation, because it's temporary staff is typically very low paid. So, for instance, if you contract with the city, you have to pay our living wage, but temporaries often don't make that. It is not a good form of employment for the person who gets temporary work. They can only work 9 months and then they have to be released.
But it seems to me a lot of these people are students who
Yeah.
want work temporarily before they go back to school or what have you.
That hasn't been our experience across the whole
Uh-huh.
town. For a while, every trash collector, trash collecting truck driver that the city hired was a temporary. In almost all of our departments, we were relying on temporaries in a manner that was abusive of employees. And my experience at CTN has been that they've hired highly qualified people, employed them for 9 months at a lower rate than regular employees, without benefits that regular employees get, and then they have to let them go at the end of 9 months,
Mhm.
whether that person wants to stay or doesn't want to stay. And that is not good employment practice.
Okay, what about internships?
Um,
It seems like this is the kind of place that could use interns.
We have interns.
Yeah,
We have
we
an
do have-
internship program.
Could we have a bigger internship program?
Well, an
I mean,
intern.
would that be useful?
An internship is meant to provide a learning experience, and if you're using interns to be clerical help, that isn't necessarily an appropriate use of an intern.
What could they have, if maybe their time was divided?
I think the bigger question is, if you're rejecting this proposal of not having an individual at the front counter to be available at all times, is really the bigger question. The nuts and bolts of it, we can figure out at a later time, but it's really just the recommendation
Right.
and being opposed to that, or perhaps moving that to tier 2 as a future consideration with more assessment to be done. The training and tours by appointment, that's already in place. So that's
Right.
not something that needs to get reconsidered. It's really the facility usage by appointment only. If you're rejecting that proposal and wanting to either move it off the table or move it to tier 2 for
Well,
consideration.
yeah, move it for tier two for further consideration of, yeah, I mean, I have no problem, with that. The other thing is, on those programs you want to discontinue, how about,
Before you go forward on something else, should we decide whether we're going to move that to tier 2?
Should we have a motion?
okay, I make a motion that we move the facility
Usage.
to tier 2.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Nay.
Me.
All right,
Okay.
I think
Okay.
we had one abstention.
Right.
Okay, so that's a tie, 2-2 with one abstention.
So,
So
okay.
does that put us back in the point of any more discussion?
What?
It would appear so.
Okay.
Can I-
So I guess for me, what it comes down to is our budget is decreasing, we have to find savings somewhere. If we find after we put this in place that we're losing a lot of people or a lot of interest, then we can revisit it again later. But we've got to do something now.
I think something should be cut someplace else.
Okay, okay.
So, and where would you?
Okay, well, that's, there's a bigger battle I'm gonna fight. So, whatever you guys want, I just wanna, I'll do it.
Okay.
If you guys wanna do it.
Because at this point, part of our conversation is that we were trying to limit cuts to production, so the programs are being maintained. And really that's the fundamental core purpose of CTN. And the training is being maintained because that's pretty core, although it's by appointment only because that actually works better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, so.
But being
it-
available to the citizenry is not important, and that
So-
should be cut.
I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying that if we if we fund that, then we'd actually have to look at those core services and decide what program or production or service that we provide in the core area would be cut to represent a similar amount of savings.
I think you have elected in your suggestion to cut out 4 programs. Is that right? There are four
Yeah.
programs. Okay, so I think maybe it makes more sense to cut out a couple more so that you could have someone available to the public.
So,
Well-
I think it's not actually fair to say that no one will be available to the public. I think it's just that it'll be
By
reduced.
appointment.
And it'll be by appointment. I mean,
At their convenience,
Yeah.
we
Is there
would
anything
set
else
an
that goes on at the
appointment.
city where you can't walk up to you go in and walk up to a desk and ask questions or ask for some help?
right. Well, this is a different sort of an operation, right? We're funded in a particular way, and that particular way is now under stress, and we need to find a way of resolving this issue so that we can continue to provide services to the core, right? And if our budget improves in the future, then we can reestablish.
It's not going to improve unless there are active, there's active fundraising going on.
I understand, and
And
that's comes in the next phase, right? But right now, we need to, play the hand we're dealt. This is where we are.
I understand, but I think some other programs that perhaps aren't that important would be better to let go
Okay.
than,
So-
and I think in some places, like the symphony, the student symphony or whatever, a lot of these organizations, we need to go to them and say, our budget has been cut, we need X amount of dollars to be able to continue this service with you.
Well, all of these programs would be given that opportunity.
But see, at this point, we're making the decision for these
The-
cuts without presenting this and seeing who's willing to pay.
Because that decision has to get done before a staff member can go to the organization and say, on this date, the Cable Commission recommended to discontinue covering this program at no cost to you.
Uh-huh.
This is going to be presented to the city council in June. If you would like to continue this production, it will cost this amount, but we can't do that for lack of the board taking action.
This is really just getting our house in order right now, so that we can
So
take
that we
action
can
later.
move forward.
Yeah.
I'd like to on that, discontinue producing programs that you want to do. How about, would you be agreeable to this, or I can make a motion this? Okay, there's 4. I would say, okay, environmental external voice, fine, cut. Orchestra night, fine, cut. Ann Arbor Summer Festival, can we piggyback that on to one of these other productions, like Access Ann Arbor, and then kind of, condense productions into a one-day. Can we do that? And I would really like to keep that TEDx Youth Ann Arbor. I watched that latest program, and I think that's an excellent opportunity to.
I don't disagree. It's 2 weeks of time, $5,000.
Right.
This is not us discontinuing all of the other work that we do at the other high schools with training and programming. This is one singular program
Right.
that's student-based.
So.
And
And
perhaps.
again, if they are willing to
That's right.
pay for the production, we absolutely then, can make the staff available to continue it.
Yeah.
For lack of them paying for the production, we wouldn't be able to continue it.
And many of these organizations have sponsors for their programs.
Right.
And as a result, they are making money, and we have offered them the opportunity to be more visible and to bring in more money for their organization. And as a result of that, I'd say it's only fair that once this decision is made, we go to them And there are still enough time for these organizations to talk to their sponsors and see if perhaps monies can be allocated in a different manner.
Here, here.
So that's with regard to the 4 that we're
Right,
discontinuing.
absolutely.
And that funding wouldn't fund the front desk personnel, it would just fund the discontinued program.
Correct.
Yeah, okay,
Correct.
so I understand that.
Are there other programs besides the ones that we are suggesting be discontinued that we might go and make the same, ask the
Appeal.
same questions of?
In 2020, making these changes will balance our budget, and that won't be necessary to cut further.
Yeah, but we're cutting a person in the front of the,
We're reallocating that person to productions.
well, so-
Again, it's appointment-based. We're available via phone call, website. The number of people who drop into CTN, having not searched on the web or social media or found us just by way that they went by the sign to, hey, Chuck, what do you do? It's very few and far between. The number of people that would make an appointment that do so for training and facility tours, by way of the nonprofit works that we do and the high school organization, that is much greater. So if an appointment's made, we absolutely would have staff available to make that appointment and assist that individual.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So you got a production coming up, and there's a staff sitting at the front desk. The production begins, he leaves his post, comes in, he either directs, camera, or whatever. Okay, so that means whoever appears at that door will just get a non-response. The production is over, and
There's a big sign on the door.
it's right, saying
We'd be
no one.
we'd be happy to assist you. Please call for an appointment or email, whatever.
Okay, but the production's over. Okay, so he comes in there, there's nobody at the front. Bingo, hey, there's nobody here. Oh, okay, give a call. So he's probably got a cell phone. Not everybody has a cell phone. I don't have a cell phone. I refuse to have one. I can get, and I know I'm probably the 1% that doesn't have one. But so I got to truck all the way back home to make a phone call. But anyways, but that's neither here or there. So he goes off, he says, okay, next time I'll make sure I'll make a phone call, make sure somebody's manning the desk. Or somebody can, if I got a question about facility uses or orientation or sign up or whatever. But that production's over. CTN staff goes back to the front desk, continues at his cubicle. And then somebody walks up, knocks on the door, he's gonna get an answer, right? That person, so that person that's in his cubicle, if Mike's in his cubicle, working on his computer, somebody knocks on the door, he's not gonna say, I'm not gonna answer the door. I mean, you don't have an appointment to knock on the door. So, so I'm saying, it's just, I don't wanna drag this on. I mean, whatever happens, happens. But I want to get back to this thing. So you're saying that on those discontinued programs, there's no flexibility of saying to rethink those. You're saying you're going to cut those far, and that's the way it's.
That's the recommendation of the subcommittee and all of CTN staff. So
Okay.
if you have a different recommendation you wanted to put forward for the commission to consider, please do.
Well, yeah, I say I make a recommendation to change that to, can I change that thing to the tier 2 or to rethink it or to, I make
Can you
a,
change what to tier 2?
He wants to take our discontinued productions and move them, and I don't believe that's an
No,
opportunity.
that would be required in order for us to meet our current expenditures and revenues for 2020, which begins July 1st. The recommended budget that city council will be considering and approving in May includes
That.
expenditure reductions in order to balance.
So if you were to recommend cutting a different program instead of one of those four,
They would have to
If-
equal the amounts that these four equal.
Right.
So TEDx was $5,000. Some of these programs are only a few hundred to produce,
So it's not gonna equal, we'd have to take a lot more off.
and some might be more popular that you're
Yes.
recommending to cut. Again, all the consideration was taken into how popular, how expensive.
Not to beat a dead horse, but popular to me, that, you know, I still believe you can go by YouTube hits.
That's the data that we have.
But it's,
But it is data. I know, I understand what you're saying about not having the Comcast viewership,
you don't have that negative.
but the online data, the majority of viewers do watch it online. I know you don't, but the majority do, and that is factual data that we have. That's real-time data that we know X number of people watch this program.
And for Gen Xers and all the millennials, they're on their phones, they're watching this online. I have it with my own children, and that's all they do. They're on their phones all the time. We are not, they are.
This CTN is a service for the citizens of Ann Arbor, not for a younger person who wants to watch it on his cell phone. I mean, our service are for, you know, I mean, I'm in my 70s, so obviously, you know, people are going to, you know, how about the senior citizens? I mean, they don't, we're cutting them out. I mean,
We're keeping a lot of programming. What we're going to do is for, once this board decides on discontinued programming, we will go to these organizations and offer them the opportunity to consider how they could help us.
I don't
in
mind. I
funding.
think that's a great idea myself. I mean, I don't see why, I just think, I'm just a great believer in CTN, and I don't like to see things cut, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I know this is mostly to do with the government channel anyways, and doesn't really touch bases on the public access channel that I am more involved in. So, but, so after this recommendation, where does it go from here? I mean, is there gonna be a motion being made to accept this?
Correct.
As on to
Correct.
city council?
And it would be sent as a communication to city council in June. At that time, I would email Councilmember Eaton, letting him know it's a communication on this agenda, so that then at that meeting, he could verbally convey to all the council members to this communication was included in your packet, and give an overview, and like he said, so he has the information to prepare them for the fact that these are the core services, anything above and beyond now. In order for us to live within our means, we will have to find funding for. And they already are aware,
Yep.
most are aware that this is happening and our revenue has been decreasing.
So at our last quarterly meeting, we went over the budget, and the budget was submitted to the city administrator, and it's been folded in. And so we're kind of stuck with the numbers that we have from that budget. And this is how we accomplish those numbers for the next year, provided that nothing dramatically changes. And that's a big assumption to begin with. And by nothing changing, I mean no more boards or commissions are added, meetings don't always go to 3 a.m., and revenues remain kind of as projected. Now, if anything changes, then the budget that we've approved already is going to have to be modified during the course of the year with council support, which is why we're communicating through this memo to council the difficulties on the revenue side, so that we can prepare them for the eventual likelihood that we'll have to supplement that source of income in other ways.
And I do think that what we have to do is look at the evolving media world. Once upon a time, I worked in national yellow pages and newspaper. We had an $85 million budget up to 1995. Everyone that I knew that was in that business is unemployed. And what's happened is, with the advent of the internet, you have seen reductions in broadcast media throughout their staffs, their budgets, etc. And it's continuing to go. And cable fees, same thing.
That's actually a great point, Tom, because to know, this is not just CTN grappling with us. This is happening to public access centers throughout the country. We are not the only ones. We had done research and outreach to other centers for this, exactly to see what are they doing, what are they doing differently, what are they seeing. Revenues are decreasing throughout the country and Michigan. That's just a fact, that everyone's grappling with this question of how to generate revenue and what type of model will create this magical solution.
And you've hit the nail on the head, because NPR and PBS are grappling with the same issues. I worked at NPR and at PBS, and all of them are grappling with these issues. It's not just CTN. And so as a result, we have to, I feel, be progressive and aggressive in our approach to maintain the great service we have.
In the next
So-
10 years, I say no more cable.
Yeah.
There will be no such thing as cable.
And so then,
It's going there now. You know, It's
So,
going that way now.
Just in the interest of, before we move on to the staff comments and commission comments, can we get a motion to accept the subcommittee recommendations?
I'll make a motion.
Tony motions, can I get a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
8, no.
3 in favor, 2 opposed. Motion passes. Okay, moving on to the commission and staff comments. So I think at this point, I would like to agree with something that Carol said earlier, and that was that I think CTN doesn't have as much of a presence in the public mind as we probably could. And I know Carol has had a great deal of experience in marketing, and perhaps would have some ideas that we could utilize in the future.
I'd be happy to share ideas, but not off the top of my head.
No, absolutely.
I actually
future
I
comment.
wrote down for us to share our marketing plan with the commission for the next
Great.
meeting.
That'd be
I can
great.
share it with Carol in advance.
That'd be great.
You don't know what you don't know, so
Yep.
all of the outreach that we currently do and
Correct.
advertising, and putting that in a black and white document that you can take a look at then to react to, and to give suggestions as to where
Thank you.
where we might need to increase
Yeah.
our time or resources.
Yes.
Because that can help, but help our future efforts
Correct.
as we move forward and
Yes.
face these budgeting
Yes.
challenges.
and perhaps if it looks advantageous, we could set up a subcommittee to look more closely at the public outreach issue.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
I will
that's great.
point out that the city, across all of its departments, struggles to reach the citizens, not having a daily paper and not having everybody tuning into the same stations on TV really limits the ability to reach the residents of the city. So I'd be really interested in both how we could do it for this commission and this operation, but also the city at large. So maybe I can learn a lot from it. I really look forward to
Maybe, I
that.
don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
That'd be great.
So-
Perfect.
Okay, any other comments from the commissioner staff? All right, can we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
And is there a second?
Here.
All right, motion carried. We stand adjourned.
Yeah, this means I'm not gonna get my trap on.